As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized CIMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a CIMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the CIMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the CIMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, our professional colleagues, friends, and students of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of ICAN on AIR, your program, our program, powered by our noble institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. I'm your host for today, Tosin Akinwumi. Today, 13th April 2023, we shall be considering another topical issue: multiple exchange rates and the impact on businesses. And I have here with me an erudite scholar, a world-class economist, a vibrant speaker, an eminent tax professional, Dr. Joshua Bamfo, who shall be discussing and dissecting the topic. Dr. Joshua Bamfo is a partner and global transfer pricing practice co-leader at Andersen, with responsibilities for Africa and Middle East. He bagged BA in Economics First Class from the University of Ghana, MA in Economics, University of Guelph, Ontario, Canada, and PhD in Economics, University of Delaware in USA. My guests have over 16 years of experience specializing in transfer pricing while working for the Big Fours in USA, South Africa, Nigeria, and Ghana. Josh, as fondly called, was a visiting assistant professor of economics at the University of Delaware, USA, before starting his TP career with EY in Atlanta, USA in June 2007. Until recently, he was an associate director at KPMG in Nigeria. Josh is an ardent speaker at TP workshops and seminars, such as the BNA's Council for International Tax Education, TP seminar in Atlanta, where he won the 2009 Top Star Speaker Award. He was also authored or co-authored about 10 TP articles in globally recognized tax journals. His areas of expertise are in global and regional TP documentation for multinational companies, TP planning, intellectual property, planning and transfers, cost contribution arrangements, and advanced pricing agreements. He has worked on a number of TP engagements in various industries, including the oil and gas industry, consumer and industrial markets, financial services industry, and telecommunication, and also technology industry. He has also worked extensively with Nigerian tax authorities to develop their TP capabilities and design TP manuals. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the rich profile of our guest on the show today. But before I bring him in, we need to go and pay some bills. Like we usually make you aware, this program affords professionals and business owners to showcase their goods and services at affordable rates. The reach of this program is global, and I assure you, you won't regret the patronage. So sit back and relax, and I will be right back with my guest after this time out. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Welcome back. We have a guest in the house, Dr. Joshua Bamfo. Dr. Josh has fondly called. You are welcome to ICAN on AIR, sir.
Thank you very much, Ogatosin. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you around, sir. I also want to welcome our viewers across the length and breadth of the country and those in the diaspora who are already connecting with us. And like I did say, we shall be considering the topic for today, multiple exchange rates, the impacts on businesses. Multiple exchange rates, the impacts on businesses. So Dr. Josh, let's start this way. A nation's national currency is expected to provide some measure of independence in its national monetary or exchange rate policies. And having you today as our guest on the show will provide our global viewers the opportunity to share from your wealth of knowledge and experience. So let's start by laying the foundation blocks for today's topic of discussion. What exactly is currency and what is money?
Thank you very much. I think this is a very important foundational question to really kickstart today's discussion of multiple exchange rate regime and its impact on businesses. Many a times people confuse the concept of money and currency. In fact, they are interlinked. Currency is a subset of money. So currency basically is some government actually giving a directive that a particular tangible product should be accepted as a legal tender, for the exchange of goods and services. So if you have cash in the form of paper notes or coins, these are, government telling us that this is an accepted means of transacting, business, that is goods and services. And so we all respect that because that directive is coming from government. So that is the most liquid form of money. But the other forms of money, you and I know that it's not all the time that you can make, a transaction with cash per se or currency. We can also access our deposits in our account, using our debit cards. That is not currency, but that's another form of money. We can also access our savings accounts, our deposits in our in savings accounts. That's also part of money, but that's not currency. So currency is actually a subset of money. All right. But in all cases, they allow us to be able to, exchange goods and services amongst each other, basically.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. I think we got that. Currency is actually a subset of money. That shows that it's a relationship. So let's move on to another question. Does currency stability and currency strength mean one and the same thing, or are they completely different in any way?
Yeah, so when we talk about the concept of currency stability, there are two ways you can look at it, and we tend to confuse the two. The first is to look at the stability of a currency in terms of the ability to buy goods and services. In that particular case, you're looking at, let's say, the Naira as a currency, and you say, is the Naira stable in terms of the quantity of goods and services I can buy with that? In that case, the macroeconomic variable that you're looking at is inflation. So when inflation is high or volatile, you see that your currency is not stable because now you can buy lesser of goods and services that you could prior to the inflation going up. So currently we have an inflation rate in Nigeria hovering around, let's say, 28% or 20+%. Now, it means that that same 100 Naira or 1,000 Naira that you had some months ago might not be able to buy the same goods and services today because inflation has gone up. So that is, currency stability in terms of the quantum of goods and services you can actually afford. And it has to do with purchasing power. The other one, when we talk about currency stability, is when you are dealing with, trade with, an outside country in the form of whether you are buying an imported product. In that case, the currency stability you're talking about is how the Naira is stable or unstable against another currency, such as the US dollar or such as the pound, right? In that case, you're looking at its stability in relation to its value against another currency. So there are two ways of looking at the stability. in terms of the goods and services that you can actually buy, and in terms of its value against another currency. That is currency stability. But when we talk about strength, basically we are looking at the strength of one currency against another. So if whenever our currency appreciates or increases in value against the dollar, we are saying that the naira currency is strengthening, all right, it's getting stronger against the dollar. On the other hand, if it gets is depreciating or gets devalued, they will argue that the naira has weakened against the dollar. So that is where we come in when we talk about the strength of a currency against that of another currency.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that clarification, for making us to know today that there is actually a difference between currency stability and currency strengthening. As we launch further in this discourse, Doctor, can you please help our global viewers to have a better understanding or appreciation of the following currency concepts? The first one is currency redesign. What is currency redesign? The next one is currency redenomination, currency depreciation, and currency devaluation.
Okay. All right. So let me look at all those four different concepts relating to currency. So currency redesign has become very, popular or infamous in Nigeria because of what occurred pretty recently. But if you think about currency redesign, it's just a matter of redesigning a new note or coin currency to replace existing ones. So when we come up with new notes or new coins to replace existing notes or coins, then it's a currency redesign to replace the previous ones. And the main reason why economies tend to redesign notes is to usually fight counterfeiting. Because when you have a currency that has been in place for a long time, you might have people try to counterfeit such currency, and such illicit behaviors has to be mitigated. And so when you redesign a new note to replace the former one, it's supposed to help fight that. But we know that the current redesign of the currency led to a different issue altogether, which is beyond the scope of our discussion, because it was supposed to be used to solve other issues besides the traditional way of dealing with counterfeiting. So that is currency redesign. The second issue is currency redenomination. All right. Redenomination is whereby you tend to change the number of digits, or that a currency actually has. And the example I can give is that of Ghana, which redenominated its currency in 2007. So prior to that, they realized that the currency had become weaker and you needed to carry so much in terms of notes and coins in order to transact business. So when you redenominate, all right, you change the digits from, let's say, 10,000 old Ghana cedis now becomes equivalent to one new Ghana cedi, right? So you've taken away 4 zeros, all right? Now, in the face value, the value has not changed, because that 10,000 old Ghana cedis should be able to buy the same goods and services that one new Ghana cedi should buy you. So it's not a change in value, but it's just that we've taken away the number of digits. And what happens is that now you have to carry less notes in order to purchase goods and services. So it helps with reducing the cost of transactions and makes transactions more efficient. So that is currency redenomination, where we change the number of digits, usually taking away some zeros, so that now you have, instead of 10,000 old Ghana cedis, you just have to have one Ghana cedi, a simple note. All right. Now, the third element, if I remember, we've talked about redesign, redenomination. What was the third one?
Currency depreciation.
Currency depreciation. All right. So once we move to currency depreciation, we are moving into the realm of exchange rates, right? And that is basically the core of today's discussion. And later on, I believe I'll have the opportunity to define what it is. But whenever you have a situation where you are trying to use the local currency to purchase, another currency, in order to buy goods and services or import products or what have you, then you need to look at whether your currency is strengthening or weakening. So currency depreciation is where the local currency is weakening against that of, a foreign currency. So if you take the Naira versus the USD, a depreciation of the Naira means that the Naira's value has decreased against the dollar. All right. And usually this is based on market forces, right? Demand and supply of the dollar. So if we go to the dollar market or the foreign exchange market and you have excess demand for the dollar, that means we need more naira to just get $1. So in that case, the naira has depreciated against the dollar. All right. So that is currency depreciation. And this basically happens in the foreign exchange market. All right. And I think the last one would be currency devaluation, right?
Sure.
So currency devaluation is similar to currency depreciation. The only difference is that currency devaluation is a case whereby the government itself decides to devalue its currency against another currency. So it's a government intervention. So rather than let demand and supply forces in the market to determine, the price of dollar, in the market. Now, government then makes a proclamation or makes a decision that from now onwards, the naira is going to be 500 naira against a dollar. So that is a devaluation. Maybe previously it was, let's say, 300 to a dollar. They said now it's going to be 500 to a dollar. So that's a devaluation because it's a government policy that sets the naira against a particular currency. So that's the difference between depreciation and devaluation. In both cases, there's a weakening of the local currency against a foreign currency. But in the first case, it's more based on market forces. And in the second case, it's more based on a government policy that sets, the local currency at a particular rate against a foreign currency.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much for that clarification, Doctor. Viewers, if you are just joining us, we are on to Dr. Josh Bamfo. Dr. Josh Bamfo, and he has been dissecting the topic, multiple exchange rates, the impact on businesses. You can send in your questions, and he's here to attend to those questions. Dr. Josh, now to refocus our discussion on exchange rates, like you rightly mentioned, please explain the following concepts as it relates to exchange rates. The first being foreign exchange. What is foreign exchange? The next one is, what is foreign exchange market? And the last one is, what is exchange rates?
All right. So basically, foreign exchange is actually foreign currency, right? So it's the fact that once there's a foreign exchange, that means that there's a foreign currency that we want to exchange for. And in a foreign exchange market, there's going to be a demand and supply for that particular foreign exchange or that foreign currency that we are interested in. So that foreign currency could be US dollar, it could be UK pound, it could be euro, whatever you. But there's a market in which there's a demand for that particular foreign currency or foreign exchange, and then there's going to be a supply of that. All right. So whenever there's a demand and supply, then there's a market. All right. And the price at which that transaction occurs is what is called the exchange rate. So the exchange rate is the price at which the naira will be traded for the dollar. Right. So that exchange rate could be 700 naira to a dollar, or it could be 450 to a dollar, or what have you. But the exchange rate is just the price at which one currency is traded for another currency. So that is basically the foreign exchange market.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Josh, for that explicit explanation. Another question for you here. Nigeria is described as a country with multiple exchange rates. So please educate our global audience on the following. What does multiple exchange rates really mean? When we say we have multiple exchange rates, what does that mean?
Okay. So traditionally, you would expect that there will be one is a single foreign exchange market with a single foreign exchange rate, which would be the going rate for each type of currency. But in some cases, you might have different exchange rates in a particular market. So if you look at the Nigeria case as an example, in 2016, when we entered into the second recession in recent times due to the oil price shocks, that led to oil prices, reducing significantly to at some point $37 per barrel. That meant that our foreign exchange reserves depleted significantly. So there was a need for the Central Bank of Nigeria to intervene. So once there's a depletion in your foreign exchange reserves, without a decrease in the demand, all right, what happens is that there's excess demand for foreign exchange, but there's limited supply. So Central Bank of Nigeria needed to intervene in one way or the other. And one way of their intervention was to create another exchange rate, in addition to, the market rate. So now we have two exchange rates, or a dual, or multiple exchange rate regime, where you have the official one, which is a fixed exchange rate regime, because the central bank actually fixed, the value of the naira against the hard currencies. Then you have a power market, where demand and supply forces determines what the price should be. All right. So where you have multiple exchange rates in the same economy, then you have a multiple exchange rate regime in that economy. And that is what we have in Nigeria currently.
Okay. So I think you've mentioned it in passing, but let's get it in clear terms. What are the types of exchange rate regimes that we have out there?
All right. So clearly, we either have a fixed exchange rate, which the thing about fixed exchange rate is whereby government has decided what that exchange rate should be. So government can decide that it's going to be 400 naira to $1, and that is what we have to go by. All right. It has nothing to do with the demand and supply forces. The challenge with a fixed exchange rate regime is that government has to consistently be able to supply forex into the market to meet any excess demand that comes in. Because if there's excess demand and you fix the exchange rate, what is going to happen is that definitely the price should go up. All right. Or else some players in the market will not get access to forex because there'll be shortage. So that is the challenge with fixed exchange rate regime. So a fixed exchange rate regime is where government sets, the exchange rate in terms of the local currency against some hard currencies, such as the US dollar. That is very difficult to maintain. So it's very rare. It's not that common. The second type is what we call the floating exchange rate regime. And that is the most common type, globally. And what that basically seeks to do is that government will usually determine some range within which they believe that the exchange rate should, hover around. All right. And then they intervene as and when, the exchange rate is going either below or above that particular target range. So, for example, government might say that, hey, we don't want our naira exchange rate to actually depreciate beyond $800, 800 naira to $1, for example. So when the exchange rate continues to depreciate, let's say 750, the only way you can bring it back down is to push more foreign exchange into the market so that there's excess supply of that dollar, which would then make the naira appreciate or that rate reduce. Okay. So that is basically how we conduct floating exchange rate regime, where government from time to time intervenes to keep that exchange rate within some reasonable range. Then the final type is the flexible exchange rate, where government doesn't intervene at all and allows the market using demand and supply forces to determine what the rate should be. Obviously, in that case, where more and more demand is placed on that hard currency, such as the dollar, then the exchange rate, the local currency is going to depreciate at a fast rate, and that can create some problems. So, hardly do you also see a pure flexible exchange rate regime, because at some point there might be the need for government to intervene. And if government doesn't have enough forex, that could be problematic. So those are the three types: the fixed exchange rate regime, where government sets that rate; the floating exchange rate regime, where government, based on some intervals, would intervene so that the exchange rate falls within some particular range or band. And the final one is a flexible one, where government doesn't intervene at all and allows the market forces to determine that rate.
Beautiful. So we have a fixed, we have a floating, and we have a flexible exchange rate regime, as you have explained. Thank you very much, Dr. Josh. We really appreciate you. And I'm sure and I'm glad our viewers out there are also following you and enjoying the way you are dissecting and doing justice to this topic. Then, if I may ask, what are the merits of multiple exchange rates to the economy of a nation? Are there merits of a multiple exchange rates to the economy of a nation?
So generally, most people do not see a lot of merits, but I think we need to be very objective here. Depending on the circumstances that an economy faces, sometimes there might be the need for an economy to have a multiple exchange rate regime. And if you take Nigeria as an example, that was exactly what happened. So in the case of 2016, where there was a significant and unexpected drop in the price of crude oil globally. And with Nigeria being highly dependent on crude oil export, as foreign exchange earnings, almost 90%, that significantly impacted Nigeria's foreign exchange reserve. So you couldn't basically leave it to the market forces to actually assess something that was depleting. So government had to intervene. And in intervening, you then introduce a different exchange rate window, which is targeted towards sensitive and very important key sectors. So what they said was, look, if it's going to be the export sector, because we want to ensure that we have more exports, all right, in order to bring in more forex, then you are going to access, that particular window where the fixed exchange rate regime, you get a more favorable rate, all right. So, and for some investments, you get access to that particular window. So that window was created to cater to some selected sectors, which are supposed to be very critical to the success of the economy. Whereas the rest of the public will then have to access the power market, which is dependent on the force of demand and supply, and obviously faces higher depreciation and higher costs, to the rest of the public. So you could see the rationale behind it. All right. So there could be some basis for having a multiple exchange rate. It can bring some level of stability into the economy where there's significant excess demand for forex and we don't have enough supply of forex, such as what happened in 2016, 2017. Other arguments are that during such periods, there can be significant capital flight. In other words, foreign investors in portfolio investments, such as bonds and stocks, could decide to take their money out of the economy. If you don't have, this multiple exchange rates, that can have a huge adverse impact on the economy. So sometimes these multiple exchange rates are introduced to deal with a very, struggling economy. So those can be seen as some of the positives of a multiple exchange rate regime.
All right, all right, all right. So if we have seen the positives, can we also see the negatives if there are?
So clearly, most proponents are for the negatives and the fact that this is not a great thing for an economy. And one of the biggest, and it's not only economists or individuals that are pushed against it. The IMF, actually has advised the Nigerian economy to do away with the multiple exchange rate. And we've had, other, bodies, business bodies such as the Nigerian Economic Summit Group also advise the government to do away with it. So there are a lot of stakeholders clamoring for the removal of a multiple exchange rate. And there are a number of reasons that's the case. So first and foremost, when you have those two markets, right? One, which is the official rate, which is more favorable and less costly, and the power market, which is more expensive to buy the foreign exchange rate. It leads to a lot of speculation. All right. So you have speculators who then speculate that, look, the price of the naira and the price of the dollar from a naira perspective, is going to be more expensive. So why don't I buy more now, hold them until things weaken, and then I sell them when I can get more from it. All right. And that purchase in order to hoard and sell in future actually worsens the shortage of dollars in the market and leads to further depreciation of the currency. And that's the reason why we see the power market now hovering almost around 700 naira to a dollar. When some few years ago, when I came to this country, I'm Ghanaian, when I came to Nigeria almost 9 years ago, I think a dollar was equivalent to 150 naira, right? So we've seen this galloping of this exchange rate test of depreciation in part because of this power market. So it leads to speculative behavior, which actually worsens the case. And when the cost of purchasing dollars is so expensive, it had businesses that are highly dependent on importation of raw materials or plant equipment in order to do their business. It's not only the speculators, even government agencies. It creates an incentive for what we call round tripping, right? That's a rent-seeking behavior. So if I work in the CBN and I have access to the dollars at the official rate, I can actually sell it to my friends or businesses. So at a price slightly higher than that, but lower than the power market, and that rent-seeking behavior actually leads to misallocation of resources in an economy. it also leads to a concept called cronyism. So if you always sell to your friends, those who you know, as opposed to the sectors that have a real need. So we've seen a lot of negative impact due to these multiple exchange rates, and that's the reason why there's a huge advocacy for having a single exchange rate regime, where when you need forex, you buy it at the market rate. All right, so there'll be no need for cronyism. There will not be any need for speculation, because everybody knows that this is the going price for forex in an open market, as opposed to going to see somebody in the CBN or knowing somebody and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So those are some of
Exactly.
the arguments that have been made against the multiple exchange rate in Nigeria.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Dr. Josh. Thank you very much. At least you'll be able to make it clear to our viewers across the globe that the impact of multiple exchange rates could either be positive or negative, as the case may be. To those who are just joining us, this is your program, ICAN on Air, and doing justice to our topic today is our one and only Dr. Joshua Bamfo, fondly known as Dr. Josh. We have a question from one of our viewers, Fagbola Temitope Adeniyi. Fagbola Temitope Adeniyi. He's asking, what accounts for the volatility in foreign exchange rates? And while the parallel market always outshine the approved government rate in fund sourcing for importation et al.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fagbolam. So clearly, what has happened is that because you have an official rate, which is a more favorable rate, most businesses would love to have access to that. But that is rationing, right? So clearly, government cannot continue to sell a big chunk of our forex, based on a low rate, because actually they'll be losing out. So the intention was to sell to the key sectors, but it's not enough. All right. So what happens is that businesses will always have to source some portion from the power market. And because in the power market, there's also a shortage in supply of forex, with excess demand, you have huge volatilities in the power market. So at the end of the day, businesses get hurt. So if I'm a huge manufacturing company, for example, where most of my importation of raw materials is going to come from offshore, all right, and my plant and equipment are going to come from offshore in terms of importation, and month in and month out, I have to buy these products using hard currencies such as USD. My demand for forex is significant, and I'm not going to get all my demand on monthly basis from the official rate. So I still have to get some portion from the power market. And that power market is so volatile because of excess demand and shortage in supply. And that's the reason why the power market faces that volatility. So at the end of the day, what has to happen is that there should be some bridging of the gap between the official rate and the power market, such that the supply of forex should be pretty significant both in the power market and in the official rate. But today you have a significant shortage in the power market, because Central Bank of Nigeria itself doesn't supply a lot to this market, and that creates a problem. So that's the reason why most economists are advocating for a collapse in terms of this multiple exchange rate to a point where we have a single exchange rate, where those who have real need for this forex are those who are going to get it. And as long as businesses know what the market rate is, they can actually plan ahead of time, even though the price might be slightly high, all right, and be able to get access to those forex and do business. But where we have multiple rates, what happens is that you really need to know some people in the central bank and get some from that particular source and get others from the power market. And without shorting the power market, we're going to see significant depreciation and volatility, and that affects businesses significantly.
Thank you very much. I think that's clear enough. Fagbola Temitope, I think we'll be glad with the response you have given to his question. We have another question, Dr. Josh, and this is timely as far as Nigeria is concerned. Nigeria is about to have new leaders in a political and governance structure. And Nigeria as a country genuinely needs competent leaders and right policies to grow the economy and reduce poverty. What is your suggestion to these leaders on multiple exchange rates and the impact it could have on businesses?
Yeah, so clearly, even though I was able to talk about some of the potential advantages of having a multiple exchange rate, I gave a very clear caveat that in a highly distressed situation like what we found ourselves in 2016, we could have some basis for some multiple exchange rate. But it cannot be the case that we hold on to that particular policy into perpetuity, even when things have kind of become much better. Remember in 2016, the price of a barrel of crude oil went as low as $37. Today the pricing is not the issue, right? It got back up at some point. It was over $100 per barrel. However, now we face a different challenge, which is the production quota, how much we can actually export. But by and large, as we deal with these issues, we should be able to come to a point where we have some single exchange market where you have one exchange rate that all stakeholders, businesses, individuals in the household sector, and even government who also sources for forex in order to actually import fuel products and other items should always face one single market. And I think this has been some of the policy recommendations that during the elections almost all the candidates talked about. But it's one thing to say you're going to do something. It's another thing to have the political will to actually do it, because there is clear incentive to an agency such as the Central Bank of Nigeria to have a multiple exchange rate regime, because some individuals could benefit from it. Will you have the political will to do away with it, knowing that some people are going to be in the will not be happy about it because we're getting some personal gains out of it? But my recommendation to the new government is to make bold decisions that they believe is going to turn the economy around. Investors want clarity. Investors want certainty. Investors need to be able to plan, whether it's portfolio investment where foreign investors come and they buy our bonds, be it corporate bonds or sovereign bonds, or they want to invest in our stock market in terms of buying shares, or they actually want to come and make some foreign direct investments where they want to come and set up businesses. The foreign exchange policy and regime is going to be critical in those decision making, right? If I'm going to set up a business here, I would want to be able to repatriate my dividends in the form of foreign exchange. So if that policy is not clear, if there's going to be a lot of volatility, we're going to lose out on all fronts. So for me, this is one of the most critical policies that I believe that this new government has to take on. This as well as the subsidies. So that'll be my comment in terms of what they have to do. They need to have the political will to do what is right for the economy.
Okay. I can only hope and pray that your advice and suggestions will get to these leaders, and our country will be a better country that we all desire. Cousin Olamilekon Hamidu, one of our viewers, want to take a dive to financial reporting as it concerns exchange rates. So he seeks to know, so as a financial reporter, among these exchange rates, what exchange rate is appropriate to use to translate a foreign currency at the end of the reporting period?
All right, I will leave it to you as a financial reporter. My background more in economics, so I'll give you the economic side of things, right? Clearly, there are practices that stick to the official exchange rate, because the official exchange rate is supposed to be applicable to some sectors, and that was the guidelines that came from the Central Bank of Nigeria. So let's assume that you happen to be in a particular sector where the official rate was supposed to be applicable to you. An argument can be made that you should be using the official rate as a basis of making that particular conversion. However, what matters in my view is the effective exchange rate with which you did your business. So if most of your exchange rate was sourced from a power market, right, then clearly that was the effective exchange rate that it was applicable to your business. It cannot be the case that you would then refer to the official one, especially when you couldn't source it from the official source. So for me, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. You need to really know what was the effective exchange rate. If you were able to source most of your forex from the official rate to do business, then lucky you. Maybe clearly that's what you have to use. But for a number of businesses, they have to source forex from the power market, and that was the effective rate at which they did business. So it makes sense that that should be the rate that has to be recognized in terms of financial reporting. At least that's my perspective.
Thank you very much. Well taken, sir. So our global audience will appreciate if you can run us through the reasons why currencies of some nations are viewed as being stronger than others. Discuss some of the pros and cons of strong and weak currencies with us.
All right. So clearly, as I said, the foreign exchange market is a market where there's a demand and supply of a foreign currency, right? So whenever you have a particular foreign currency that is in high demand, such as the USD, which has become, the globally accepted, currency for global international transactions, then there's always going to be some significant demand for the USD. And that's the reason why the USD is relatively stronger than some of the currencies that we find here. So that could be one major factor. Apart from the fact that, there's a significant demand for it, other factors such as interest rates also impact, the demand for a particular currency. So you have some like the US pound, the UK pound, which consistently has been stronger than the USD, for example. Now, because interest rates in the UK, usually are higher than that of the US, and the UK is also seen as an advanced economy and pretty stable, you're going to have, portfolio investors demanding, let's say, UK bonds and what have you. And once there's that demand, then that leads to the maintenance of the strength of that particular currency. So a number of factors actually would impact whether a currency will stay strong or would weaken over time. But it's always going to come through the demand and supply forces within a particular market. Now, there's a general notion that the stronger a currency, or the better for an economy, but that's not entirely true. All right, because what you're going to recognize is that there are other advanced economies that have currencies that are not as strong as others. For example, you take Japan. The Japanese yen has always been a relatively weak currency, right? But that is good for the economy. The same can be said for the Chinese yuan. All right, the Chinese currency is not as strong as the pound, neither is it as strong, as the euro, for example. But that is good for them. It begs the question: why would that be the case? Where some countries might prefer a relatively weak currency as opposed to a strong currency. So let's start with the pros and cons for each one. Let's start with a strong currency. When you have a very strong currency like the UK pound, all right, what happens is that your imports are cheaper because you take a strong currency and you buy, products from other countries which has a weaker currency. So your imports are cheaper. So if I'm a resident of UK and I have a pound, I can actually import products at relatively cheap price. And that's a good thing for the citizens or residents of UK, for example. So for a country that is more import dependent, you want to have a strong currency because it makes your imports much cheaper. All right. And it allows for purchasing and good purchasing power. Now, on the other hand, if you're an export-oriented, economy, such as Japan and China, like Japan exports a lot to the rest of the world. They don't want to have a strong currency because when they have a strong currency, that means that their products are very expensive on the international market. So they lose a competitive edge. So rather, in that case, they would want to have a weak currency so that their products are much cheaper on the international market and there's more demand for that such product. So let's take automobile. All right. We know Japanese cars, Toyota, Honda, Mazda. These are cars that we all demand because they are more affordable, So they really would want to have a relatively weak currency compared to US cars such as, General, Motors or Ford or Chrysler. All right. For similar type of, cars, that could be more, expensive if I have to buy it in dollars compared to Japanese yen. So that is a reason why you might have some economies that actually prefer to have a weak currency. In fact, US tends to accuse China and Japan of sometimes intentionally weakening their currencies so that they gain competitive edge in the international market. Now, when you bring it to Nigeria, you need to ask yourself, what type of economy are we? Are we export oriented or are we import dependent? Today, we tend to be more import dependent. So whenever we have a weak currency, we all cry foul because we like to buy imported goods. So it becomes so expensive and it leads to imported inflation. And that's the reason why from this part of the world, whenever our currency is weakening, we all start crying foul because we are import dependent. However, if our economy were to flip around and become export oriented, all right, and we export more of our products, especially processed finished products, then we might have an incentive to have a weak currency so that we can export more and make gains out of it. So there are pros and cons to strong currency versus weak currency. It depends on the nature of your economy, whether you're export oriented or you're import dependent.
All right, all right. Thank you very much for the enlightenment, particularly on the fact that nations can deliberately and intentionally weaken their currencies in order to gain competitive aid. Thank you for that clarification. Let's quickly come to acknowledge some of our viewers who have joined us on this show today. Ismail Sulaiman, all the way from Kebbi State. Thank you for joining us today. Oladokun Olatunji Yusuf, all the way from Ibadan. Thank you for joining this show. Uche Marizu, all the way from Port Harcourt. Thank you for joining ICAN on Air. I'm sure you are enjoying the section today. Shoson Olusoji from Abeokuta in Ogun State. We acknowledge you. Thank you for connecting. Quickly, because time is not on our side, we have a question from one of our viewers. Biliamin Oladeinde, what determines the number of exchange rates? Are they single or multiple? Is it government policy that determines that, or the availability of foreign exchange to defend the demand?
Thank you. So clearly, it's a government policy, all right, and that policy could be right or it could be wrong. So as I said in Nigeria's case, government at the time felt that there's significant drop in the foreign exchange reserve due to the unanticipated drop in oil prices globally necessitated the need for a dual exchange rate regime so that they can protect some key sectors to ensure that the economy continues to bounce back from the recession. So that was a government policy necessitated by a recession that wasn't anticipated, right? Now, if you decide to go to a single exchange rate regime where you have one exchange rate, yeah, there's still going to be, significant demand for forex, but all the foreign exchange reserves from the CBN will be going to a market that faces the same exchange rate. So it's not going to change the supply, but the window is going to be one. There's going to be only one price, all right? And if that price is high, then it's going to clear out those who really do not have a need for that forex. So, for example, where individuals want to take their children to expensive, schools in UK, and you cannot afford it because that single exchange rate says $1 should be equivalent to 800. Then you keep your children in a boarding school here in Nigeria, all right? But the businesses that have a real need will be able to afford it. So it has a way of clearing out, what are not necessary demand for the forex. So yeah, it's a government policy, and it's up to the government to decide which one will be appropriate for us. And most, economists believe that it should be a single exchange rate regime as opposed to multiple.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Josh. Another question again from Onwuma Ernest. So what's the implication of countries making efforts to boycott the USD on international market vis-a-vis our multiple foreign exchange rates?
So clearly, what has happened is that as a fallout of the lingering effects of COVID-19, as well as the Ukraine Russia war, what we've seen clearly is that the USD has gained so much in terms of its values, gone stronger. Now, there's been a lot of borrowing. Remember, the COVID-19 period was a period whereby there were huge budget deficits, that were incurred by a lot of emerging and developing countries. And that meant that they needed to borrow more. So once you have to borrow, especially in foreign currency, and your financing obligations are in that foreign currency, such as USD, all right, and your currency has depreciated significantly against the dollar, it gets to a point that your debt financing becomes unsustainable. And that is what we are seeing in Ghana today, which has actually turned a seemingly good economy upside down. So what most of these economies are trying to look at is how do we engage with other jurisdictions without actually having to demand as much in USD because it's become too expensive. So that's where the creativity is coming in. So in Ghana, what they've done is try to do what they call gold for oil transaction with Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia has excess, fuel products. All right, the Ghana government needs to buy fuel products from these countries to Ghana, but they also have gold. So rather than go buy USD before you go and buy the fuel products, why don't we transact directly between gold and the fuel products, so that we don't really have to go through the USD route because it's become too expensive. So it's become a fallout of that, and I believe that it's a way that will help stabilize the USD, because if more and more countries are using other means to transact among themselves, as opposed to over dependence or using USD for international transactions, then there's going to be lesser demand for USD, and that will help stabilize the value of USD. And maybe we might go back to it, but for now, it's just too strong. And so nations have had to be more creative in terms of going around it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Josh. I can see many thumbs up for you. I can see our viewers are really enjoying this segment. As you are winding down gradually, another question for you here. As a knowledge coach, briefly take us to the classroom. What are some of the reasons for the depreciation in the value of the Nigerian naira?
So clearly, when you look at the naira and its depreciation, you always need to look at it from the two sides of the coin. The first is the supply of forex, and the second is the demand side. Clearly, most of our woes has come from the supply side. So our major foreign exchange earner is the sale of crude oil, export of crude oil. In Previously, it was the price of crude oil that was hurting us. Luckily for us, the price of crude oil globally has gone up. Unfortunately, our production, capacity has dwindled due to, theft, vandalism, and other reasons. We are way below the quota that OPEC has set for us. So that is one problem that is making it difficult for the Central Bank of Nigeria to supply enough forex to meet the excess demand that we are facing, and that is leading to the depreciation. So that is one major reason for the depreciation: the fact that we don't have enough supply of forex through the traditional mean, which is our export of crude oil. The second has to do with ensuring that we have enough remittances, which is the second source of forex supply coming in. When you have multiple exchange rate regimes, all right, sometimes these remittances do not come through the official means, because if it comes in unofficially, I could convert those dollars at a higher rate, which is the power market, as opposed to the official means. So there's been a challenge in terms of the amount of remittances that we should be getting, especially at a time that we're seeing a lot of people leaving this country in droves. This so-called Japa syndrome. We should expect something positive in the form of remittances going up. So that is something that we really need to see, so that we get something good out of a bad situation. So those are some of the supply side examples. On the demand side, one of the issues which I believe the CBN has tried to combat, is dollarization. When more and more businesses want to quote their services or products in dollars, like you go to rent a place and they'll give you a dollar quote, or you want to take your child to an international school and they want to quote in dollars. So they force you to go and demand dollars in order to make those purchases. I know CBN has actually tried to fight against that, but dollarization leads to excess demand for dollars. And if there's not enough supply, that also leads to depreciation. So the impact in terms of depreciation can be seen from two sources: the supply side effects and the demand side, and that is leading to the depreciation of the naira.
Thank you very much, Dr. Josh. Who else can do this better if not for an economist like you? On the final notes on this session today, let me take your thoughts on these. ICAN is always open to ideas that would positively advance the growth of our members, the accountancy profession, and the Nigerian business environment at large. So what is your advice or suggestion to ICAN on filling knowledge gaps in the subject of multiple exchange rates and the impact on businesses, especially in Nigeria?
So first and foremost, so let me use as my final parting words, because I think ICAN is doing an awesome job. I mean, this is my second time being a presenter on this show, and almost every time I'm wowed by the quest to actually help our members of ICAN, businesses actually ramp up knowledge in diverse areas that actually impact businesses in a positive manner. And I believe this topic we're discussing today is very instrumental to almost all of us. Whether you're an individual, whether you're a business, you are impacted by what is happening in terms of this policy. If you want to travel, you need dollars, all right, in order to travel. And if it's depreciating at a fast rate on the power market, you are impacted. If you're in a business where they need to import raw materials or buy plant and equipment, and you can't get access to forex, and they might lay off because they cannot do business, you might be impacted. So I think ICAN is using this platform excellently well to share knowledge, so that we are well informed as members and as businesses, so I can take advantage of this information and apply them in our everyday life or in our businesses in a positive manner. So kudos to ICAN for the great job that they're doing in terms of sharing knowledge.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joshua Bamfo. We want to say a very big thank you for coming on today's show and sharing your wealth of experience with us. On behalf of the producers of this program and editorial team and our viewers across the globe, we appreciate your time and effort. And we hope when next we call on you, you will happen on our call. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tosin Akinwumi. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, let's quickly take some announcements. ICAN Fellowship Conferment. ICAN Fellowship Conferment now comes up on May 20th, 2023. Applications are still open. Members who wish to climb up the ladder of the membership could quickly take the forms, complete the applications, and make their payments in this month. The fellowship conferment programs now comes up on May 20th. Also, the ICAN annual dinner comes up on May 6th. Purchase your tickets. Tickets are on sales. Ensure you get your ticket. All this information are hosted on ICAN website, www.icanig.org. You can have all this information on ICAN website. And also to our teaming members, ICAN members, let's make every effort to pay our ICAN subscriptions and contribute our part to the growth of the Institute. All right, our beloved viewers at large, ICAN on Air now comes up every Thursday of the week between the hours of 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Nigerian time. Every Thursday of the week between the hours of 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Nigerian time. Dear professional colleagues and our global viewers, you would agree with me that today's program is worth the while, highly educating and instructive. I want to say thank you for being part of the show. And that will be all for today. Till I come your way again with another guest and another contemporary topic, please stay safe and sound. On behalf of the editorial team and the producers of this program, I'm Tosin Akinwumi. I'm saying thank you for watching and bye for now.